Former Yankees catcher Jim Leyritz with Armen and Levack on the 104.5 The Team every Wednesday at 5:15. The best of Leyritz at 6:30 this evening. All thanks to Red Wing Shoes. And Jimmy, you've been in Cincinnati at the All-Star Game. You're back home, born and raised in Cincinnati, man. How's it been to spend the week in Cincy?
It was great to see the All-Star Game back here because, one of the biggest things when I grew up in Cincinnati was opening day. And every opening day started in Cincinnati. That's not the tradition anymore. And it's kind of Cincinnati's kind of lost its luster a little bit. But I tell you what, with this All-Star Game and the way they did this, it was a great weekend in Cincinnati.
Jim, before we get into the All-Star Game in more depth, Home Run Derby, did you like the new rules?
I like the new format. I think it's great. It definitely made it entertaining that you weren't sitting there going, okay, how many home runs is this guy going to hit this route? I think it was beneficial for the player. I also think it was beneficial for the people watching.
What was it like in that stadium for the Home Run Derby? As you mentioned, just the emotions of Todd Frazier, the second half of each round, just coming in the clutch and the hometown boy winning for the first time since 1990.
Well, it was nuts. The funny thing was, I wasn't at the Home Run Derby to begin with. I was in my parents' place at a restaurant. We were eating dinner, watching it. And then when in the restaurant, it was so cool because the restaurant, you felt like you were at the game. All these people in Cincinnati, they were screaming and yelling. And every time that he hit a home run, you felt like you were actually at the game. And then once he won the semifinal, I got in my car and I drove down to the stadium to watch the last round. And I pulled in the back entrance and got in and watched the last round. And that stadium was going nuts. It was quite a show.
Jim, as I'm watching it with the new rules, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, man, Todd Frazier is lucky his brother can pitch, and Chris Bryant is unlucky his dad can't.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was, too. And, that's what we're talking about. All of us are talking about. It wasn't so much we were impressed with what Todd Frazier did. It's the fact that his brother was able to, do what he did and be able to throw the strikes. This new kind of clock where you have to, as the pitcher, you got to give him enough pitches to hit. And they did a pretty good job of that. And like you said, Bryant couldn't quite pull that off.
Jim Leyritz with Armen and Levack, thanks to Red Wing Shoes. Todd Frazier's brother was probably under more pressure than Todd Frazier himself, right?
Exactly. I mean, trust me, for somebody that throws a lot of batting practice to my kids, I can't imagine having a clock where I have to make sure that I number one, have to throw strikes, that he can hit outs, but also that I got to throw him at a pace that, it was really kind of funny, too, watching some of these guys having to wait the ball landed, trying to rush the clock and throw sooner. It was pretty interesting. And like I said, I love that new format because there's a lot of strategy involved, and when to take the time out and all those other things. It was a little bit more of a thinking process than just the normal home run derbies that we've had in the past.
Jim Leyritz, thanks to Red Wing Shoes. He was at the All-Star Game last night in Cincinnati. Mike Trout, back-to-back MVP, an amazing player. Buster Olney last year compared Mike Trout to Mickey Mantle and said he was better than Mickey Mantle. That's bothered Levack ever since he's heard that. Should we be able to say that Mike Trout is better than Mickey Mantle?
I would say Mike Trout takes care of himself better than Mickey Mantle did. I would say as far as athletic ability, I think they're both, they're both right at the top. But as far as taking care of himself and getting longevity, I think Mike Trout will probably maybe last a little bit longer because back in those days things were a little bit different as far as what the guys did off the field, more so on the field.
Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting point. Anybody who's seen 61, the movie and everything, you kind of get a feel for Mickey's nightlife. He was the man about town and the man on the field. Nothing against Trout. It seems blasphemy for me for a guy so early in his career to be compared to one of the all-time greats.
Well, yeah, but what really was interesting to me last night was to see these the statistics, because I didn't even think about it until they showed it. Between him and Bryce Harper, they got 7 All-Star appearances already at age 23 and 22. That's pretty impressive. And I think, Mike Trout is the kind of guy that I don't see letting this go to his head. And that's where he reminds me of Mickey. He enjoys what he's doing. It's not a job. It's not a struggle. He really loves going out there every day and performing. And he has fun out there. He's not just out there like a robot. He has a personality, it's fun to watch this guy.
Should the All-Star break be longer, Jim?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty good. I like the fact that they have the extra day, the one extra day off for the guys that actually played in the game. And I don't think, as far as the guys that didn't play in the game, I don't think they want more than 4 or 5 days off at this point, because at this point we're really just starting to get into a groove, and some of these teams, the way they're playing, this little 4-day interruption is just enough, but not too much, to where they can come back and pick up where they left off.
When we watched the All-Star game, one of the biggest takeaways for me personally was the welcoming of Pete Rose. The national story is it's the Pete Rose show, but when we locally sit here and look at it too, we kind of think about, should he be back in baseball? You were there. How great was the welcome, and should Pete be back?
I understand that the spotlight of Cincinnati, of course, they're going to welcome him. They love him here. But I think the national spotlight, too, a lot of people are in support that, here we are. The guy's paid his dues. You're using him to make money. It's about time that, we turn the page to this guy, honor him, get him in the Hall of Fame as a player, and then move forward. And then it doesn't become a story anymore or an issue. But one of the things I can say is, the majority of people that were down there, and the majority of players that I found this week, that the Hall of Fame guys and the guys that I ran into, most of them felt like, it's about time.
Jim, I find that really interesting. Jim Leyritz, thanks to Red Wing Shoes with Armen and Levack, 104.5 The Team, former Yankees catcher, two-time World Series champion in Cincinnati, Ohio, has been at all the All-Star Game festivities. And Jim, yesterday on Mike and Mike, Johnny Bench joined the boys, and he had an opposite take.
Admit to what you're doing, first of all. Admit to it. Stand up to it. If you're going to face everything the way you've faced everything always in your life, and you've been on the 5 different positions, and you've made the All-Star team, and you faced every challenge. That's what Sparky said. He was facing every challenge. He would try harder than anybody. That's what he has to do. That's what he's had to do for a long time, is face up to the challenge, admit to what the problems are, and first of all, admit it to himself.
And it sounds like, Jim, that Johnny Bench does not forgive Pete Rose. I mean, that was the takeaway from what I heard yesterday, and that's why I find it interesting that the guys you talked to are opposite of that.
There's been no love lost between those two. And you could even see it on the field last night when they went to shake hands. And Johnny's always been pretty outspoken about that. But I do think that what he's saying more than that is for Pete to just come clean with everything. Has he done it or not? Whether Johnny knows something that we don't know, that he hasn't come clean with. But as far as, from what I've heard and everything about Pete, this new thing that they just brought up with ESPN and everything else, it really was no new news. It's the same old news that we knew, that he bet on the game of baseball, and that when he was, as a player manager, as a manager, and everything else, but he never bet on his team to lose. And unless there's something out there that says that or shows that, and maybe that's what Johnny's talking about, saying, Pete, maybe he knows that Pete bet on something to lose, or maybe Johnny knows that and he's not admitting it. And that's what he meant by that comment, was come clean with everything. But as far as what I've heard and what I've seen out there, I've never heard anything that he's ever bet that his team would lose, and therefore it was not a scandal.
Jim, when you look at the young talent out there, what do you take away from second baseman New York Yankees Rob Refsnyder?
This is what we talked about at the beginning of the year, and I told you guys that this is going to remind me of the 93, 94, 95 years of the Yankees, where some of these young kids were going to get an opportunity. And when they came up, they needed to take advantage of it, like I did when I came up. And we're seeing that. We're seeing, for me, I remember when I came up, Dave LaPointe, Steve Sachs. Besides me performing, the one thing that they said they loved about it was the enthusiasm that I brought up, the way I played the game, and that's what we're seeing with some of these young kids. And with him, I think this is what the Yankees need. They need to inject some personality, some guys that have some drive, that go out there and play as hard as these young kids do. And I think it's exciting for us.
Jim Leyritz with Armen and Levack, 104.5 The Team. And Jim, the Yankees are 3.5 games up in the AL East. Should we believe in this team being a playoff contender?
Injuries are a big part of it. Key injuries are, the bigger part. But if Tanaka can have 15, 20 more starts, if CC can just be a 500 pitcher between now and the end of the year, and the bullpen stays intact, this team can definitely win that division.
Jim Leyritz thinks the Red Wing shoes were just like the Yankees. Excellence is a standard. Visit them at cliftonpark.redwingshoestore.com. They can fit your feet, your job, your hobby, and your wallet. JimLeyritz.com and The Greatest Save, his organization, his foundation, thegreatestsave.org. Jim, so glad that you've had a great time in Cincinnati this week. And once again, baby, you got that insight. You're bringing it to us. Now, I heard a birdie.
Oh, no.
A birdie told me that I was supposed to call you the King, that your nickname is the King. Is that allowed? Is that okay?
Well, that's a given, man. That's been out there for years.
Okay.
You know,
well, because we were hanging out. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I was hanging out with Bernie Williams.
Yes.
And he goes, "Oh,
okay.
the King." And I said, "Oh, can I?" I said, "I'm going to call him the King." He goes, "Oh no, that's a secret, man. Do not tell him I told you that." So that's why I wanted to gauge your reaction first before I told you it was Bernie. Because I go, "Bernie, you said it on the radio. I'm going to tell him." And he goes, "No, seriously, don't tell him."
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Now, listen, when I was in San Diego, the nickname it really took off because Sterling Hitchcock and Donnie, Mattingly were the two guys that give it to me in New York. And, of course, Hitchcock was with me in San Diego. So it just kind of, and then I had all the home runs during the playoffs and that in San Diego. And everybody in San Diego had crowns on, the king signs.
Cool.
It was pretty well known. It's no secret.
Well, your boy Bernie put on quite the show this last Friday night in Schenectady. I want you to know that. We had a great time with him.
No, I know. I heard he's out there doing a lot of great stuff. And, we always used to kid Bernie that, his hobby was baseball,
Good stuff.
No.
Jim Leyritz, the King, baby. JimLeyritz.com. Jim Leyritz, we'll talk to you again next week, man.
All right, guys. See you next week.